decided to do something I haven't done before. So I'm going to do a little bit of story time, but I'm going to read the prologue on one of my books. So this was my recent release, the Shadow Minds Journal. And as a lot of you know, I haven't published a book except for a novella in 2019. And the reason for that is I've been very busy moving internationally, so it's not as easy as I thought it was, but also I've just been enjoying my life. And at this point in time, or in that year, I wasn't as focused on completing my manuscripts, but for the new year, I'm ready. But I've never done this before, so I've never read out of my books. So I thought maybe I could do that. For those who have asked, here it is. I don't know if I'm a very good storyteller, but I guess we'll find out together. But this is for the Shadow Minds Journal, so I absolutely loved writing this book. It's the darkest that I've written so far. It definitely brought out a lot of psychology. So all the characters, it's about angels and demons, so there's a lot of darkness and evil in this. And I just loved how twisted my characters were. And in it, Vivian Lair, who is the main character, is possessed by 7 different demons. So all of them have their own personality, their own tics, and it was really interesting to engage with them when they had all their different backstories. And this is obviously a series, so this is only book 1, the Shadow Minds Journal. But I can't wait to finish it because I just find these characters crazy. And I love it. Without further ado, I will read the prologue. So I hope you enjoy this. Here we go. I'm so nervous. Yeah. The problem with sleeping was it left me vulnerable to the creatures that would prey on me at night. In this place, a very distant and dark reality, I could not fight, scream, or control the environment. All I could do was run. The world and experience were completely controlled by the entity which was imposed on me. All I could do was my best at escaping its clutches and not fall for the numerous ways that they would come to me. Was I terrified? Extremely, because every time was a matter of life and death. Was I strong enough? Sometimes I drank normally, like any other human. Little did anyone know that before I was turned into a guardian, I already had run-ins with these creatures of the night. Those attacks started when I was a teenager and entirely human. No one knew, not even Haymen, and I would keep that information hidden. The attacks increased when I reached adulthood, but I was able to better identify it, prepare myself for the lethargic effect it would play on my body. It increased and it got worse, but I was able to handle it somehow until Haymen turned me and forced me into the contract. Death would have been my better option. Now being a guardian, I was the very host that those entities savagely struck, and now I had to find a new way to handle it and disperse their interest in me. Just like now, I was dreaming, rather standard and easy sleeping, but then there was a shift, like my dream had connected into a different channel on an old TV antenna. The dream went slightly distorted, or should I say, it felt like I went distorted. Sometimes instead of a new attack, I would relive memories of the old ones. I was already running along the dark road which surrounded me with dim houses. The light posts flickered off as I ran past each of them. The man or creature behind me was laughing as he chased me with a slight limp that did nothing to affect his speed. I was no longer the 16-year-old girl who had first lived this, but tears still welled in my eyes as I panicked. I could not fight them. I knew I couldn't. I could not change into my demon forms, and I knew that to linger, to try and oppose the entity of whomever it was, would only allow it to get closer to me. I ran faster, my lungs heaving and shards spreading up from the chill in the air. My breath began to lock from exhaustion as I felt him getting closer and the odd niggle on my back, brushed with coldness that I feared was him catching up and his fingers reaching me. I could not let him touch me. He would possess and take hold of my body. He would kill me from the inside, and I feared not to face death, but the uncertainty of what kind of afterlife or darkness it would spiral me into. These creatures were unholy, and the touch of demonic spirit that not even I wanted to confront in the light of day. I noticed an old warehouse which Slay had lights on and ran for it. I knew I shouldn't have, but it seems like every other option around me had disappeared. He was leading me into there. The bright lights of the warehouse, which catered for a retail store, speckled my sight for a second. I panted for only a moment before dashing between the shelving, forklifts, and jumping over crates. I looked behind me but couldn't see him. My shoulder smashed into the corner of one of the crates, throwing me off balance. I caught myself and instinctually clutched for my shoulder, heaving. The hair on my arms rose as I circled around in the small shelving I was at. My breath was heavy and I willed it to stop. Please, he will hear me. A tear slid down my face. This was my 16-year-old self reliving the moment, ready to wake and cry to my mother about a force against me that I could not explain. I knew what was to come, but I still tried to change the fate of it. It didn't make it any less terrifying. I turned to run into the other direction when a splash of cold water hit me. It felt like shards over my already too cold body, and I screamed from the pain. The chuckle from the Chucky doll ran up my leg and across my shoulder with an open wire. I didn't have time to react, but only to scream. As soon as the wire touched my entire body, I convulsed and hit the floor with a current of electricity that my body could never handle. My body was convulsing as I woke. Despite the sleep paralysis I woke up with every time I had one of those dreams. Tears slid down my eyes as I felt like I was that 16-year-old girl once again. I knew what would happen. It was the same as last time. Eventually, the convulsing stopped and I could move. Slowly but surely, I sat up to sit in my king-size bed, the silky light blanket dropping to the floor with my movement. I wiped away the drool from my mouth and wrapped my arms around my legs. I sat in the dark, unable to identify anything in my room. Luke had left hours before, and I made certain of that. I never slept with another in the room. It was a vulnerability and a risk I wasn't willing to take. No one else could know about the night terrors that haunted us. I sighed heavily, trying to balance my breathing. So much has changed since I first had that dream at 16. Now 24, I no longer had my mother to cry to. She died when I was 17. She didn't understand, didn't want to, saying that was just a nightmare. But at least I had that companionship and someone to talk to instead of others who would say I was going crazy. In a twisted way, I wondered if it was the reason why I was handpicked by Haymen to become a guardian. Not that he ever said anything from that day, and I couldn't remember how I was turned. I just remembered that it was against my will. I never dared ask the others if they had the same experiences in their human life too. I touched the large silken marble on my bedside table that summoned Doc. I had to report this to the Shadow Mind's journal. The only thing I would keep to secrecy was that I was reliving the nightmare. I had to tell Doc that it was all anew. The Shadow Mind journal was the recording and deciphering of those who reached out to us in our dreams. It was in hope that we could identify the entity and it could be tracked so then we could hunt them during the day. There were many secrets of the Guardians, but no outsiders knew that this was our true purpose. To find those who Haymen considered his greatest threat, or so I presumed. I couldn't imagine anyone going to all this trouble to find one species of demon unless threatened by it in some way. Well, I hope that went all right. I'm not sure. Yeah. But thank you for listening and tell me what you think if you've read it. Thanks, guys. Bye.